Hello my friends, welcome to part 2 in a series of videos on the symmetry of prime numbers when placed around a circle, and we're also seeing how this relates to some ancient ideas in astrology. And what we've learned, or what we've concluded from part 1, you don't have to watch part 1, you can pick up here if you want to, is that 210 degrees is a huge symmetry point. In astrology, that's 0 Scorpio, and you can jump from 210 by adding or subtracting 210, or 210 divided by 2, which is 105, or 210 times 2, which is 420. You're jumping 210, or double 210, or half 210, and you get these huge symmetry points, starting with 210. Why 210? I'm going to show you why 210 is the powerful symmetry point. Why 210? Well, let's build this up. First of all, there's a rhythm. It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm of every 210 degrees. You get these symmetry points. It's the next level of rhythm. Each level of the rhythm is more precise. It's a more exact symmetry. It has fewer exceptions. The first level of rhythm is simply odd and even numbers. All prime numbers are odd except for the number 2. So there's a rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Does the rhythm work perfectly? No, there's one exception. But except for that one exception, all prime numbers are odd. Now there are a lot of odd numbers that are not primed. Tons of them. The first one we see is 9. But it's a rhythm. It's not a perfect rhythm. It's not like every prime number is odd, but it's pretty darn good in that every prime number is odd except for 1. Now what's the next rhythm? The next rhythm is 6. So prime numbers are rhythms of 2 and 6. And what happens with 6 is that the prime numbers are in column 1 or 5. With the exception of only 2 primes, 2 and 3. All prime numbers appear in this first column or the 5th column. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, start a new line. And they line up. This is the rhythm. This is very well known in mathematics. It's called 6n plus or minus 1. It's a well-known formula that all prime numbers are a multiple of 6 minus 1 or plus 1, ending up in these 2 columns. And there are fewer exceptions, fewer numbers that are not prime that end up in these 2 columns. This is a more precise, accurate indicator of the prime numbers than if you go every 2. So prime numbers are a rhythm of 2, a rhythm of 6, and we already saw that the next one is 30. Let's go back to our first slide. This rhythm of 30 continues from 30 to 60 and so on. So there are these 3 rhythms. There's 3 rhythms. 2, 6, and 30. Well, it's very simple to see what's going on here. You simply multiply the primes. Every 2 is the first prime. 2 times 3 is 6. What's the next prime number? 5. 2 times 3 times 5 is 30. When you multiply the primes together, you find the rhythms. Okay, these become the symmetry lines because they're patterns. Some of these patterns will end up being symmetrical. Some will not be symmetrical. But these symmetries are simply because these columns, you get columns of primes based on that rhythm. And if they happen to be equidistant from that number, you get these symmetries. That's all it is. So what is the next more perfect basis for symmetry of prime numbers? Well, we simply take the next prime number. What's the next prime number after 2, 3, 5? 7. So what is the next beat or modulus function, as we call it in mathematics? It's 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 is 210. That's why 210 is the most powerful symmetry point. It's a very special number because these symmetries of primes, remember, primes are fundamental, symmetry is fundamental. This is like a really powerful integrating point. It's like a tapestry in which things are woven together and held together at these symmetry points. It's when the fabric of numbers is stitched along these symmetry lines. It's a big deal. It's simple, but it's a big deal. So 210 ends up being a special number. Okay. Okay, so that's why they're symmetrical. Now, what if we keep going? What if we go to the next prime number, 11? 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 times 11. And then we add the next prime number, 13. And then the next one is 17. Next one's 19. We're going to get these huge numbers. Well, for fun, I multiply them out. And oh my God, something fascinating happens that I was not expecting. So, by the way, 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 times 11 happens to be 2,310. This happens to be 30,030. When you multiply by 17, you're going to get these huge numbers. But what we also want to do is put them on a circle, right? Because that's the whole idea of what I'm talking about, is what are the symmetry points along a circle. So if I do a modulus 360, in other words, I take this 2,310 and I go 360, 360, 360, where do I end up? That is going to be even a stronger symmetry point. So because I'm putting these around a circle, this 2,310, when I divide it by 360 and I get the remainder, that's going to be even a stronger symmetry point. And then I could take that program that I wrote and just add more and more prime numbers to it. I didn't go all the way out to these huge numbers, but we could. It's not hard to do, and it should confirm it. You know, I'm like 99% sure it's going to confirm it. These are the symmetry points. Where are they? We can go beyond 210. It's going to be interesting. And we're going to end up with a number between 0 and 359 because that's what we're doing. Let's put it around those degrees. Which degree gets highlighted? Okay, so far, 0 Scorpio, and then we saw the, other things, but 0 Scorpio at the top. What do we get? 150. The 2,310, I mean, you can do it on your calculator or whatever. If you're not into number crunching, just believe me, it'll end up at 150, and the next one ends up at 150. What's interesting is that 150, 0 Virgo in astrology, is 210 in the other direction. Whoa! As we go to these more and more perfect symmetries, with fewer exceptions, we end up at the same points. Fascinating. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, there's going to be a mathematical proof for all these things, but just exploring these things, this is what we find out. So instead of going 210 forward, we go 210 in reverse. And here, I ran all the way up to 41, and then I just stopped. We could keep going, but I just stop at some point. And here's what we get. When we go to 1719, I didn't put the full number here. I'm just going to show you the modulus. We end up always, once we hit 30, we always end up with 30, the opposite point of 210, or 30 and 210, or we end up with 150 or 330. 150 and 330 are the opposite points. So in astrology, these are 0 Taurus Scorpio and 0 Virgo Pisces. They are the quincunx and semi-sextile points in the zodiac. So they all end up at the same exact points, We don't get anything new. It reinforces these are the critical points. Okay, so in the program I wrote, I only went up to 360 times 5, which is 1800. And to see those, to confirm what's going on with symmetry points, that program could be, just somebody goes in, adds more prime numbers in there, and we would confirm that this is true. But according to the theory, the mathematical theory, these are the symmetry points right here. 0 Taurus, 0 Virgo, 0 Scorpio, and 0 Pisces. That may sound weird, but there's something interesting going on. And what is the most important one? 0 Scorpio. 0 Scorpio is the most important because once we get above 30, we hit 210. The next most important is 150. So it's 210 and 150. 0 Scorpio and 0 Virgo are the big ones. 0 Scorpio is number 1. 0 Virgo is number 2. These are the points that astrologers call quincunx, the beginning of the zodiac. They are the power points, generally regarded as not even being important in astrology. But this is telling us not as important as some other things, not as fundamental. These are the critical change points. They transition us to more rarefied levels. They are transition points from one level to another level, to one level of symmetry to another level of symmetry. And we're going to see this repeated in other ways as I move forward. So that symmetry around 30 that we saw originally with 2 times 3 times 5 is 30, it's retained in that 210 and 150, and also the opposite points of 30 and 330 are multiples of 30. But what's happened is when we go to these next level, it's not all of the 30s and 15s. It's specifically 210 is number 1, 150 is number 2. He pulls out certain ones as the supersymmetry, the highly powerful points where things are, you might say, vibrating and connecting or integrating and sewn together at 210 and secondarily at 150. Now, an interesting aside is that if you take the 0 where we started, you take the 210 and the 150, and you take their opposite points, which are the 30 and the 330. So I have 6 points, the 0, 210, 150, and the opposite points, and you add 90 to those, you end up with the beginning of all 12 zodiac signs. So this 30 rhythm is fundamental, but something special happening at 0 Scorpio, secondarily at 0 Virgo, and then less important at the opposite points. Okay, so the division of sky into 12 zodiac signs at 30 degrees are the points of fundamental symmetries. We can think of these as vibrating nodes in the celestial sphere. Vibrating nodes are points in which these fundamental elements of numbers are meeting together in these symmetry points. Now, let's talk about some ancient ideas. For some reason, ancient people were focused on 210. They don't tell us why. And now we're finding out that 210 is a powerful symmetry point. How were they focused on 210? They were focused on it in this way. A fundamental idea in astrology, and if you're not interested in astrology, it's just still curious historically and culturally, like what's going on here. They came up with this idea that each of these 12 signs has a planet associated with it. The planet associated with Aries is Mars. They don't tell us why. They just say Mars is connected to Aries. It rules it, is the terminology. And there's a planet associated with Taurus. It's Venus. And there's one associated with Gemini. It's Mercury. They just tell you these rules. They don't, as far as I know, they don't explain in any detail why, but they do. And what happens, they do sometimes give you this diagram, but they don't know where the diagram comes from, is if you put 0 Scorpio, 210, that number 210, at the beginning, you get a perfect, here's the word, symmetry. You put 210 on the left, and you get a perfect symmetry of these associated planets. As if they knew that 210 is the symmetry point upon which to base this. And what they did is they built from the outermost, the slowest and coldest. Saturn was considered to be cold. It's way out, it's slow and far. It's from that Saturn, and you move closer and closer up to the lights, the sun and moon at the top. Sometimes looked at as like a ladder of evolution, like you're going up to the top. And using 210 as the starting point for the symmetry. So you have Saturn ruling Capricorn Aquarius, Jupiter, the next two signs, Mars, and you cross the halfway point, and you get to the planets within the Earth's orbit. When they didn't know about heliocentric positions, they do know that Mercury and Venus stay near the sun, and the sun and moon are the same size in the sky visually. They're like the same exact size. The moon is actually sometimes, when it's far away, slightly smaller than the sun. When it's closer, slightly larger visually. There's the two lights up at the top, and then the planets that stay near the sun, you get this perfect symmetry. It's a coincidence. Did they do this intentionally? Were they aware of 210? I don't know, but it's fascinating. Very fascinating. There's that 0 Scorpio with symmetry. Interesting. They knew about prime numbers when a lot of the ideas in astrology were pulled together somewhere between 500 and 300 BC, in that range, probably around 300 BC. When these ideas in modern astrology were pulled together, Euclid and all that stuff was well established. They could easily work this stuff out. They knew about those rhythms of primes and all that stuff. Okay, now, here's an idea not from ancient astrology, but an idea that I mentioned in another video. The video is called The Scientific Basis of the Sidereal Zodiac. I'll try to remember to put a link to this video in the description below in case you want to watch it. But there's been a lot of questions about where does the sidereal zodiac come from? And what I came up with is that the sidereal zodiac is based on a resonance of the galactic center. Now, the galactic center is the only point in the sky that many astronomer-astrologers believe is the only realistic anchor point for the sidereal zodiac. A lot of people say, well, the fixed stars are fixed. Well, they're not fixed. They're moving. Over, the 90 years of a person's lifetime or whatever, they don't move a lot in relationship to each other. But over a few thousand years, the constellations are changing. I've made videos about this. The Big Dipper no longer looks like a dipper in some numbers of thousands of years. The stars do have some motion. They're not fixed. And restricting it to a person's lifetime seems rather myopic. So what point can we use if there is such a thing as a sidereal zodiac? The galactic center would be the obvious point. Well, that galactic center, if you make a resonance of it to 0 Taurus, 0 Scorpio, because why 0 Taurus, 0 Scorpio rather than the beginning of the zodiac, Aries, and the opposite point, Libra? That would be more obvious because 0 Scorpio is the symmetry point, and that symmetry point is a transition point to another level. And the theory that I present is that the sidereal zodiac is actually not based on the stars. It's based on 3 levels of spin, of angular momentum. It's all explained in this other video. And this resonance created at these different levels of spin is what creates the relationship of houses to the tropical zodiac, and the next connection is the tropical zodiac to the sidereal zodiac, and it's all based on the resonance, same angles, of the galactic center to the 0 Scorpio. and therefore also the opposite point, and the resonance point that puts all three of these points into a vibrating system. So what we're looking at is we're looking at understanding astrology in terms of vibration, in terms of astronomy, in terms of sacred geometry, not in terms of being a symbolic archetypal language. That archetypal language is born out of the fundamental frequencies and the physical nature and the physics of life. It gives us a much more coherent system. It explains a lot of things that are otherwise not explained, and we've done research using modern research methods with control groups and whole works that support these ideas. So we're at a whole new level of transitioning astrology from a belief system to a system of understanding supported by modern research methods, very careful and rigorous research, and we also have very strong theoretical foundations for understanding it. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details of how this resonance works. You can just watch the other video. It's at least a half hour long going into all that, and then there's other videos that support that. So we don't need to go into that. I just want to mention Zero Scorpio is useful to understand in terms of understanding some ancient ideas and the cutting edge of new insights that explain what the sidereal zodiac is, and it's not what astrologers think it is. It's not actually based on the stars. That idea is very weak because the stars are not fixed, etc. So in an evidence-based practice, we look for ideas that are the most consistently supported and have very few confusions. Cognitive dissonance is the term I'm looking for. Cognitive dissonance about it. Okay, so Zero Scorpio ends up being important. I'm not going to go into this diagram. It's just I just copied and pasted it from the other video. You can watch that video if you want to get into this in more detail. My point is Zero Scorpio becomes not only interesting mathematically, but it implies certain things that become useful for understanding how astrology works and what the sidereal zodiac actually is in a consistent, internally consistent way that doesn't have all the cognitive dissonance and unexplainable details that other theories have. Now, I want to mention this. This idea that there are patterns in prime numbers is nothing new. I'm just showing a pattern of prime numbers when you do a modulus 360, when you put them around a circle. And I haven't seen much mention of it. But here's two other patterns of prime numbers that are well known. One is called the Ulam spiral, and another one's called the Sachs spiral, named after the mathematicians who discovered these things. There's a really wonderful video called Prime Spirals Number File. I'll try to remember to put the link to that in the description below. Wonderful. I think it's only 15 or 20 minutes long. Wonderful video explaining these patterns of prime numbers. So fascinating. They even have quadratic formulas to predict the likelihood of where prime numbers will be. So patterns of prime numbers is well known. It's been explored in many different ways. And I've added another insight into the patterns of prime numbers when they are placed around a circle. I've done similar things for Paisano periods, showing the patterns of Paisano periods when placed around a circle, and they're unbelievably complex and intricate and fascinating, also tied to ideas in astrology. These ancient thinkers seem to have been aware of these things. Otherwise, I don't know how they would have coincidentally come up with the ideas. Anyway, I wanted to mention that what I'm doing here, two things. One is adding another insight into patterns of prime numbers. It's kind of not shocking in a way because everybody in mathematics knows prime numbers are arranged in those rhythms of 2, 6, 30, and 210, if you think about it, and that they would make symmetry patterns is not shocking, but it is interesting to confirm it and see exactly how it works, and to confirm it with a program that counts up these number of symmetry patterns and show that it's actually there, that it's true, and that there are some ancient ideas and other ideas in astrology that seem to relate to it is quite fascinating as well. Okay, so there are other insights into these patterns of prime numbers. I'm just adding another one, which is, again, probably not as stunning and insightful as when the Ulam spiral and the Sachs spiral were discovered, but still interesting and very important for people interested in astrology. Now, a few more things. The way in which these symmetry lines, these symmetry points of prime numbers get distributed around a circle with an emphasis on 0 Scorpio is not the primary thing that creates the zodiac signs. Zodiac signs are created out of Paisano periods. I have at least a dozen videos on the ways in which Paisano periods, which are modulus functions of Fibonacci numbers, create the zodiac signs. The zodiac signs are formed out of these number sequences. They're embedded in spin. This is all explained in some detail. This is a very compelling theory, much more compelling than any other theory. Let me read from the slide here. The symmetry of primes is not the primary way that zodiac signs are created, but the symmetry does reinforce the structure of the zodiac. And probably more importantly, the symmetry of primes affects the meaning of the vibrations. So in this system of astrology that is much more scientific, we have very rigorous controlled research confirming a lot of these ideas. These numbers in their relationship to symmetry are related to the way these numbers work as vibrations. So for example, 23 and 53 are separated by 30. There's that 30, that number 30, one of the fundamental numbers that form structures of prime numbers and the way they're distributed, they have a similar vibrational impact in vibrational astrology. They have some similarities in meaning. And we suspect that as we study vibrations above 210, what we're learning from the power of 210 as this very powerful symmetry point is that, for example, 211 is prime. It should have a very strong 1 quality. It's 1 above the symmetry point of 210. So these things become useful for giving us hints as to what vibrations mean. And when you have a theory that helps you discover something, it makes it much easier to make those discoveries. The great value of theories is, one, they're fun to understand, but they're useful to help you make discoveries. And that's what we're finding by understanding this. Also, maybe these prime pairs are important, like 13 and 17 that are symmetrical, around 15. We have not investigated that yet, but that's another possibility. Now, here's an interesting thing for fun. Not only the symmetry points, but also the way prime numbers are arranged in other ways seems to have a relationship to the impact of the vibration. 23, let me give an example. 23 is the first prime number that does not have a twin prime. Twin prime means a prime number that's 2 away. So 5 and 7. 7 is 5 plus 2. 11 and 13, separated by 2. 17 and 19, separated by 2. When you get to 23, it does not have a prime number within 2. You have to jump by 4. 23 minus 4 is 19, which is prime. So it's the first number that does not have another prime close to it. And it's almost as if 23 knows this. It's kind of like by itself. It's not paired up as closely. And it has a lot to do with decision making. It has a lot to do with seeing what potentials are there and choosing which one you're going to make. And 53 is similar to 23 because it's separated by 30, because of that 30 function in the symmetry of prime numbers. That they have a relationship. And 53 is the first number that does not have a twin or a cousin. A cousin prime is separated by 4. So 23 has a cousin, 19, which is 4 away from 23. It does not have a twin. The first number that does not have a cousin is 53. The closest primes to 53 are 47 and 59. They are 6 away. So you have to subtract 6 and add 6. Those are called sexy primes. So the nearest prime to 53 is a sexy prime. So 53 is also very independent. As we go to higher numbers, we get the prime numbers are less frequent, they spread out. So it's fascinating. 23 and 53 are so closely related in meaning. They're separated by 30, which gives them a similarity, and they're similar in their separation from nearby primes. And they seem, from our research, to have a similar meaning. 53 is a more collective form of 23. I won't go into that. But what I'm talking about here is for people interested in astrology, that this arrangement of prime numbers gives us hints of things to look for to help discover what the primes mean. It's very, very helpful because you're not starting with a blank slate. You already have hints of what to look for, and it helps you find it much faster. Now, what's the next most independent prime, separated out away from other primes? Happens to be 211. It does not have a twin, a cousin, or a sexy prime. It goes over 6 away. The nearest primes to 211 are 199 and 223, very far away. Now, this was mentioned to me by one of the attendees at our YouTube member meetings. We have the membership meetings twice a month. One of the attendees, Ton from the Netherlands, he pointed this out, and I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that. Fascinating." So as soon as you cross over 210 to this very strong 1, 211 should be very independent at this high frequency level. It's going to be interesting when we research it. We already have ideas of what these things mean. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this understanding of symmetries and distribution of prime numbers, it's not just some nerdy thing that's not useful. It's very useful. So here I summarize what I just said. 23 and 53 are similar because the mod 30 function is 23 for both of them. And amazingly, in addition to that, they are both separated from the nearby primes. 23 is the first number that does not have a twin, and 53 is the first number that does not have a cousin. It's more than 4 away. Okay, and then 211 is the next level of independence. Just these are things that are useful to us in understanding how primes are distributed and how they affect the meaning of them. It helps us when in our research to look for these things. We can find it much faster. We know what to look for. So that 210 degrees is so fundamental to astrology. And how is it related to astrology? It transitions to higher frequencies. It transitions from one level of symmetry to another level. It also transitions from the tropical zodiac to the sidereal zodiac. And in that video on the scientific basis for the sidereal zodiac, I explain how the sidereal zodiac is another level of angular momentum or spin. It's a transitioning to another level. There are 3 levels of spin. It's all explained there. So in 2 ways, 210 is a transition point to higher frequencies and higher levels of spin. Again, that's explained in that video on the scientific basis of the sidereal zodiac. Now, interesting also, the quincunx and the semi-sextile. This is 0 Virgo, 0 Scorpio, which quincunx 150 degrees shortest distance measured to 0 Aries, and the opposite points, which are 30 degrees. In ancient astrology, those were considered not to be related, like they're not talking to each other. It ends up that they're extremely important. But some astrologers, I'll just read from the slide, some astrologers revere ancient traditions to the point of being reluctant to develop beyond what has been passed down to us. So some astrologers, when you tell them, oh, the quincunx is this powerful thing, they'll go, oh, no, it isn't. The ancient text told us it's not. It's like, whoa. I am sure the ancients would want us to continue to learn, explore, and discover, not to just repeat ad infinitum, whatever they had figured out. And they had figured out a lot more than was passed down to us because a lot of the ancient materials are lost. Also, let me mention this, the asymmetry of the quincunx. It's not like the elements that are this nice stable trine. It's not like the modes, cardinal, fixed, mutable, which are these nice squares, like squares and triangles. It's odd. It's like a little disjointed. It doesn't have this nice, simple geometry. However, when you jump by 150 or 210, you do hit all the beginning points, but it's a more unstable kind of feeling. You're jumping around not in a simple way, like the triangle and the squares of the modes and the elements. And that, I think, is what helps it transition to the next level. It's giving it this something unbalanced to make it spin. So I wrote here the asymmetry of the quincunx and semi-sextile, that they don't divide into a simple triangle or square like the elements and modes. It may be that quincunx and semi-sextiles, they are the energetic forces that facilitate the spinning of the cosmic wheel of life and the chakras of life. They give a dynamic quality rather than a static quality. And they're involved in these transitions to higher levels or more refined levels, or you could say more granular or detailed levels of vibration and spin. So it all fits together very beautifully. Okay, so concluding comments, the patterns of prime numbers create astrological effects that help determine the meaning of vibrations. They help create the sidereal zodiac, and they are involved in the arrangement of the ruling planets of zodiac signs. So these patterns of prime numbers are directly related to several fundamental ideas in astrology. And understanding astrology in terms of sacred geometry, resonance, and an underlying higher dimensional space provides theories and insights that facilitate discoveries that are validated with modern research methods. And that is the most exciting part of this, is using modern research methods, even a strict hypothesis test, as we did in the research on bipolar disorder, and getting high confidence levels that these things actually exist. So we're moving astrology out of a belief system, out of personal experience, out of traditional ideas into confirmed ideas based on a detailed understanding of how all this actually works in ways that are consistent with ideas in mathematics and physics. That's it, my friends. So that's a two-part series on the symmetry of prime numbers and their relationship to astrology. If you want to email me, there's my email address. There's my website. There's also a place to click to become a member. If you really want to get into this, we meet twice a month live in an online Zoom meeting. It's really fun. The attendees bring lots of interesting ideas, and we all stay current with all this stuff. So anything you want to discuss or explore, we can do that. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.